Hi everybody. Hello, IROCKNITTERS, and welcome to episode 129, the 5-year podcast anniversary. I started this podcast 5 years ago this week, and I have 129 episodes. I have been doing an episode every other Tuesday since the very beginning. It is hard to believe that 5 years have passed. If you go down and scroll back through all the videos on the YouTube channel, you'll see how my hairstyles have transformed. Have you ever looked back at old pictures like that and you're just like, what was I thinking, right? When I grew my hair, when I dyed it dark, when I dyed my bangs orange. 5 years from now, I'm going to be like, what was she thinking? Going gray. Look what came in the mail. I think I might have to, can you guys hear that? Chevy has a bone and he has it up against the gate. I'm hoping you can't hear that, but he is gnawing on that. This is the new Gudrun Schoden catalog. It just came in the mail. I think it's for fall. Swedish design with a green sole. They do organic and sustainable clothing. You know, it's my favorite. I wear all of the stuff all of the time. There's very little in my closet anymore that doesn't make me happy. That's not Gudrun Schoden. But as I've told you many times, they have a sales section, so buy your stuff on sale. It washes great. They have great fabrics. And I think I might have to go out and get something new. I thought, oh, celebrate good times. Come on. Right? So congratulations to me. 5 years. Some of you have been with me since the very beginning. So drop a comment down below if you are one of those people that have been here and have probably watched 129 episodes of me blathering on about my passion about knitting. Man, do I love talking about knitting. I got new sunglasses. Oh, I should try those on for you guys. Well, my husband just took my car. If he comes back, I'll remember. I got new sunglasses and I went in to pick them up, and I was telling the guy, he was talking about my clothes, and I said, well, I'm a knitter. Look at the back of my car over there. And he looked out and he's like, oh. And then I said, no, I teach knitting. I write knitting patterns. I have a podcast. And he's like, oh, you're all in. And then I went on and on telling him all about knitting, and he didn't care at all. Yeah, it's the extrovert in me, right? I want to say hi to Kathy, who said hello to me at the Three Kittens yarn shop last Monday night. So hi, Kathy. Kathy came up because we went to a speaker. So I thought I would just start today with a Cori story. I have like 3 Cori stories at the end to tell you. But she came up and said, I watched your podcast. I was so happy she did, because I don't know what any of you look like. And you all know what I look like, so it's easier for you to say, hey. It was really nice to meet her. She had on a beautiful blue sweater she had knit. She is knitting the 4 sweaters in a year with Darn It Anyway over in Stillwater. But Jody Long came to town. He is doing a Knit Across America tour, and he is a knitwear designer out of the UK who is currently living, where is he living? He lived in the UK and then in Spain and now in another country that I can't remember. I tried to look. I don't want to spend that much time. Anyway, but he's moving back to the UK with his partner in a little while, he said. He was speaking at Three Kittens yarn shop, and Ross and I had gone up north fishing at the cabin at the resort. We don't have our own cabin. And I was not super happy about going. And so I said, just go with a friend, take someone else. I don't want to pack up. You know, when we go up there, we have to take the towel box and the kitchen box and the food and all that stuff. And I was just kind of not wanting to go. And he's like, well, I don't really want to go. And I don't need that, you know, the cabin's just available for the weekend. And then I said, I'll go. And so I packed up all my knitting stuff. I packed up my design work, all my books, and we went up. We came home on Monday morning. We got back here, I don't know, about 1 o'clock. And then you have all the stuff to unpack. And I knew Jody Long was speaking. See, I'm coming all the way back around. I knew Jody Long was speaking at Three Kittens at 6 o'clock. And, you know, we had laundry and stuff to unpack and stuff to get settled, and Ross wanted to mow. And finally I just was like, I'm showering, I'm leaving. I texted a couple of friends and I said, does anyone want to go? I bought 2 tickets. My friend Mary said yes, and I love that about her. She'll always say yes. So I picked her up, and we went over to 3 Kittens. Oh, he's going to drive me nuts. I'm going to have to let him in. Do not, I repeat, do not get a puppy. Oh, so much work. Ross just went to run an errand, and he can hear me, so he's just whining and whining. And now he's going to knock the mannequin over. Sit down, lay down. Anyway, so we drove over to Jody Long. You know, it's rush hour across the city. It's probably a good, 25 miles, 30 miles over there. And it was so worth it. It was so good. We got to 3 Kittens. They had a lovely spread of food. They had it all set up for us. Jody spoke. He was really interesting speaker, and he is traveling all over the US. So you can go to his website, you can go to Facebook. It probably is on his Instagram, Jody Long Knits. He is the head designer for Knitting Fever, and I happen to know the Knitting Fever rep, who is Janine, and her mom is Rosemary, my mentor. And when I walked in, Rosemary was sitting there. So then I was just tickled, and of course Janine was helping Jody, and so it was just lovely. There were quite a few people there. I mean, it wasn't packed, but then he shared a ton of his samples from his new collections. And yeah, he had yarn samples, he had color cards, all kinds of, you know, interesting things. We were probably there maybe an hour and a half. He had some people model some of the samples, and then we all got a goodie bag when we left. So we all got the Jody Long book, Cables Across America, and this is his new, the fall, all the fall items. So he had different sweaters. These are all on his Instagram page, so you can see. But the one that Mary tried on that she wants to knit is that Pet Katia one. And I thought it was really cute too. And then I said, you know what, the yarn is so heavy, it's gonna make me look heavier than I am. And then Mary said, I'm gonna try it on. And the size was too small for us, but she did, and it looked so good. So here's the sweater. And there it is. It's got this bottom shaping like a shirt. It was just really cute. The only thing I don't love about a lot of these sweaters is their drop shoulder. And to me, drop shoulders can look really sloppy. And he's a huge proponent of bottom-up seamed construction. And I understand that, right? Seams provide stability. They make things not turn on the body and tweak a little bit to the side. But there's nothing like knitting a top-down sweater and just having it be all in one piece and having it be done when you're done. And maybe that's just all the, fast appeal, you know, where we just need gratification, quick gratification. And then we got samples of the yarns. So this is Artisano, and that is a alpaca silk wool viscose DK worsted. This is Rove Soft. This is alpaca acrylic and Highland wool. It's a single ply. We got Coastline, which is cotton, viscose, nylon, linen, and worsted. That's the one that sweater is made out of, and it's a really interesting thread structure. And then this one is My Little Sunshine, organic cotton and acrylic in fingering weight. And then we got a skein. And Mary opened up my bag, and then she opened up her bag, and I got like a taupe. And she got this one, and I said, oh, I'll switch with you. And maybe she would have liked this one better, but this is color 13 Lighthouse, and this is in the Coastline, which is Italian cotton and linen blend. So it's lovely. It's really pretty, and Cori colors. So a lot of the Knitting Fever yarns have polyester. So they have acrylic or, you know, some other polyamide, nylon, whatever, in them to provide some structure to the yarns. But yeah, it was lovely. It was really fun. It cost $5 to go. And yeah, I was so glad I went. I came home late and my husband just looked at me like, you kind of left me in the lurch. Like, we hadn't picked up the dog. We hadn't shopped groceries. He needed to fix the lawnmower. And I was just like, bye. I just thought, you know what? I went fishing for the weekend. It's not quid pro quo at my house ever, but I was just like, I did your thing. Now I'm going to go do my thing. I did get a lot of knitting done, but I worked the whole time we were gone. I just worked and knit and worked and knit. So I'm trying to get everything done before I have my shoulder replaced October 2nd. So for those of you that are new, I have multiple replacement body parts. So far I have 2 knees, a hip, and 2 thumbs that have been surgically fixed. I had a foot surgery as well. I've had multiple knee surgeries before the replacements, but now I'm going to have my shoulder fixed. It's hanging way lower. I can't hold it up. I don't have any range of motion. So hopefully that will fix all those things, but I'll be out for a couple months. So I'm going to record a couple podcasts ahead of time with a couple of friends. So that will be fun. And then those will go up while I'm recuperating. The featured designs this week are the Trevor hat and cowl, which I designed for the Trevor project, where I donated the proceeds from the sale of those 2 items to the Trevor project, which reaches out to help LGBTQIA youth. It's a mouthful. I want to get it all right. Who are struggling with their identity or going through the crisis or needing help. They have a 24-hour hotline. So I donated money to that. And so those are those 2 projects, and I did knit them in a rainbow yarn. So that was fun. And that was came out a year ago in June or 2 years ago in June. Oh, time. I think it was 2 years ago in June. And then the last design in the alphabet is the Winter Sunset Cowl. This is a beautiful cowl. If you have mini skeins, you might want to go out and do the cowl and take a look at that one, because it's really pretty. What am I wearing today? I'm wearing my Pippin Poncho. We got up, we went to church. Man, our church has good music. We have a pretty progressive Lutheran church, and wow, the music was just great today. By the time we were leaving, I was just tapping my toes. It was so good, singing the songs. But I threw this on because it was only 60 degrees this morning. It's going to get up into the mid 70s today. It is glorious. Yesterday and today were just beautiful, but I thought it might be cool. And so I just threw this on over my polka dot dress. So it's a lot. I got a speckled shawl over my Gudrun polka dot dress. But yeah, that's what I have on today. It's just my Pippin Poncho, which is the same stitch repeat over and over and over again. For the whole thing, you knit a rectangle and then you knit another rectangle, and you just pick up right here and seam it over. Super simple. Can you see the other seam? There it is. So it just goes over your shoulder. Super easy to wear. You can throw it on and off. It's very open, so it kind of covers you, but you have like open work going on. So it's not warm in any, particular. It would cover your shoulders if you were wearing a sleeveless dress. And the neck hole opening's big, so you can just take it off if you get warm. So yeah, that's the Pippin Poncho. I have so many questions to answer this week. This is going to be a long podcast, so I'm going to try to be succinct in my responses for all of these questions that you guys are asking. It was great to go in and see so many questions, and I'm behind. Some people have asked these over 2 weeks ago, and I didn't get them done on the last podcast. So you have done a wonderful job encouraging us to put our stash on Ravelry. I have a very small stash, mainly because I buy yarn for a project and then knit with it right away. I don't know who you are. There are so few of you in the world, but there are some of you who just buy and knit and buy and knit. Yes, I know that is unusual, but I never seem to know how much is a sweater quantity of yarn. What if I decide to make a long cable cardigan versus a short sleeved crop? Until I know the project, I don't know the yarn amount required. Now to my question. After knitting a project using stash, I believe Ravelry reduces my stash quantity to the amount of yarn I have left. So do you recommend leaving yarn stashed in Ravelry with partial skeins listed? Most of my stash in Ravelry is leftover bits from projects I have already knit. I'm just trying to figure out the best way to see my stash on Ravelry that is usable for projects versus just leftovers. Oh. Get over here. Chevy. Ross came home, Chevy got up, knocked the light. Now he's in the garage. Okay. It's just like your day is completely interrupted every half an hour by a puppy who just wants to play with you. And I love him. He's so good. He's so much fun. He loves everybody, but whew, it's just a lot of work. Okay. This question is from Nanranda, and it ended up saying she'd like to see her stash on Ravelry that is usable for projects versus just leftovers I may eventually use to make a scrappy project like a blanket. And I answered everybody's questions in the Ravelry thread. So you can go in and read the questions that people are answering and then my responses to them so that they get a response fairly quickly. I do want to say that I don't keep my leftovers scraps in my stash. I have all these half skeins in a tub or two, and I tend to know where I have them. I keep all my fingering together, kind of my DK together, and also sort it by color, but I'm not much of a scrappy knitter. I do know others who keep those small amounts listed, and I do think that Ravelry makes it pretty easy because yes, it does reduce the amount of yarn once you've put a project total in. So if you weigh your project and it's 4.2 skeins and you put that in there, the 0.8 remaining skein, the fifth skein, will show up in your stash as a 0.8. So Ravelry will reduce it down. If you put 5 skeins in your project, even though you only use 4.2 skeins, then it will be eliminated from your project. So that would be one way to not have those show up, is just to put full amounts of yarn that you purchased. I guess one suggestion I would have would be to move those scraps all into your all used up section. That way they would be separate from your large quantities. So over on the right hand corner of your stash, you can choose where to house your stash. So you can put it in all used up, or you can put it in will trade or sell. So that's another option. And a lot of people don't know that. So if there are skeins of yarn in your stash that you are willing to get rid of, then you can go over and click on those. That doesn't mean you have to sell them, but if someone needs them or is offering money for it, then you could sell them. So that sometimes you go in and everybody's just says stash not for sale, stash not for sale, but that's just because they don't know to go click on the button when they enter their stash into Ravelry. That's basically my response. I do not use don't leave my leftovers in my stash. Mine are all just larger quantities, but I have cleaned out my bins. So if anything was small and fingering weight, I put it in a basket. If they were larger balls, like more than 50 grams that I could use for something else, I put them in some of the glass containers that are scattered all over my house. And then I have a bulky box, I have a worsted box, and then I have some tall baskets that I got at when a yarn store closed that are kind of tiered, and I have those sorted by color, and those are all just leftovers. So if I need a scrap of yarn for something, I'll just go grab a ball out of that. But the question at the beginning was she doesn't know how much yarn to buy. I just always buy too much. I almost always buy 6 or 7 skeins of yarn. That can get me just about anything. If I make a sweater and I have leftovers, I'll make a hat. If I'm gonna do a cabled, hooded, long sweater, I'm gonna need 8, but that's not gonna happen very often. And if I'm gonna do a short-sleeved, cropped sweater, I'm gonna need 4 or 5. But I wanna have the options always of being able to do other things with it. So I like having the extra skeins. It is an extra expense, so I completely understand that, but I like going to my stash and not being like, oh, I only bought 4 and I need 5, right? That I would rather not have that happen and have too much. So I almost always buy 6 or 7, DK or worsted skeins. Fingering weight, I only usually need 2 or 3 fingering weight skeins, depending on what I'm knitting. So I'll often buy 2 or 3. And then in the heavier weight yarns, I don't knit sweaters that often. So that's how I know. But there are definitely counters out there, yardage amount counters that you can Google and come up with. How do I know how much yarn I need for a sweater? And then it will give you, if you're making it long sleeved, crew neck, it'll give you counts for different sizes. So you can go look up that yardage and then jot it in your phone or take a picture of it. And then that way, if you are out and about and you want to know how much to buy, I'll try to find a link for that. I used to carry it in my phone all the time, and now I just know how much I need. But if you're at the yarn store and you're thinking, gosh, I'd like to make a sweater out of this, but I don't know what, you could kind of reference that. Hope that helped, Nan. I'm wondering where your inspiration for pattern designing comes from. Do you see something that makes you want your own version, or do you explore new techniques or stitches? Can you talk about the process? And this is from K8R, Cater. Like, my inspiration comes from everything, but I have a huge design notebook that I have been keeping for years, where I tear pages out of catalogs. I take screenshots of things I see online. I see something on the TV and I'll pause and I'll take a picture. And so I could design for the next 20 years, I think, and not run out of ideas. And so when I get asked to do a collaboration with a yarn company, I get that notebook out and I just start paging through. Kind of depends on what weight of yarn they want to use, or what they're trying to sell. So then I have to kind of narrow it down to what, if they want an accessory, or if they want a sweater or a poncho or a scarf or a shawl. But I get my inspiration from everything. When I'm out shopping, I'll take pictures of clothing items, interesting stitch patterns. I just came across one the other day in my phone, and it was just like a long rectangular shawl and had a cable all the way up one edge, and I took a picture of it. Will I ever design something with that? No, but it might inspire me to design something. And I already have folders made up of things that I really want to design in the next few months. I guess hats are the easiest thing to design. It doesn't take a lot of time and energy. You can, throw a stitch pattern on a hat and come up with, kind of a clever idea. But there are millions of hats on Ravelry and Etsy. And so I think my best bet is always to design something that's unique. And so I'm always trying to think of something that's clever or unique. And that comes from me always wanting to learn a new technique. So whenever I'm knitting something new or doing something new, like the construction of this poncho is super interesting because it has this piece right here that you pick up and you just sew in, and it's only that long. And then that connects the two sides of the rectangle together. And I just wanted to try that construction. And so then I just found a stitch pattern that I really thought would be nice to do. And I have several of these in different weights of yarn because they're just so easy. Actually, I'll leave that off for now. They're just so easy to throw off and on. But it's all about technique for me. I want to learn something new. I want to do something different. I think these cropped sweaters are kind of the new thing. And I wear a ton of dresses. And once I figured out that, you could knit it a lot shorter and kind of hit it at your smallest part, your high waist, and it could be kind of, a flattering look with your skirt hanging down, then I just decided to do a cropped sweater. So my newest design that's coming out at the end of September is a sweater design. It'll be cropped, it'll short sleeved, but also be written for regular length and long sleeved. And so I'm also trying to provide lots of options in the patterns, but it takes a lot more time and energy. So I have 15 testers on this test knit right now, and I sent it to my tech editor. She did a revision. I accepted her changes, asked a couple of questions, sent it back to her. Then we sent it out to testers, and I got a version number 2 revision from her that I didn't see in my Dropbox. I'm telling tales here. So I sent the pattern that had been revised once, not twice, out to all my testers. And then within the first 2 weeks, they were finding all these errors and like little mistakes and things weren't working out, and they were constantly, and I was like, how did we miss these? Like, how did we miss all this stuff? And so I was, just going in and making changes and updating the pattern. And then, I don't know, we were well into the test knit before I realized. I sent my tech editor a note saying, gosh, this whole section is off. I just can't believe. And she's like, I revised that whole thing. And I'm like, what? So we were like on version 6 or 7 of the pattern before I realized that she had made this second revision. And she's a new tech editor to me, and our communication has been great back and forth, but things can slip by, and I didn't know she put another version in the Dropbox, and they're in there by project, and I'm always working on more than one project at a time. It was a hot mess. Like, I felt so bad for my testers because they were just finding all these mistakes. So that pattern would have been better off had I only designed it for like fewer sizes and just short sleeved and cropped. But because I had the long sleeve version and the longer version in there, it made the pattern much longer. There's more room for error. There were more errors that got missed because I didn't see that version. And so the process was me figuring out what I wanted to do. I had this idea. I showed you guys several episodes ago. I showed you kind of this sweater that had these boxes on it, these big boxes. It was very mod, very 1960s. And I wanted to do that sweater. Like, I really wanted, it was a dress, but I really wanted to make that into a sweater. And then the more I sat with it, I was just like, that is not going to appeal to as many people unless it's pretty, because it was graphic and bold. And so I had to like rethink multiple times over how to make that better. And I sat with it for most of the month of May, just trying to figure out how to make it. I probably did 12 charts and then I'd look at them and now it's narrowed down. The boxes are small. They start out small and then they get bigger, and it's beautiful. The sweater is like glorious. I'm so excited about it. I'm using Michelle of Woolens and Nosh Yarn, and the process was long. Like, then I had to knit it, and then as I was knitting it, I had picked 5 colors, and I knit the first 3 colors and I loved them. And then I had these 2 other colors, and when I added the green, I just wasn't thrilled, so I ripped it back and I added the blue, and I was just like not thrilled. Then I asked a group of knitters, I'm like, blue or green? And they're like, oh, I don't know. It gives it a very Southwest feel. And I'm like, do you guys think I should just leave the 3 colors? And they said yes. And so that's what I ended up doing, which makes it a completely different sweater because now it has far fewer colors, so you don't have to buy as many. But we were using 50-gram skeins for the yoke. So like, there was this whole process in June that I was just going back and forth and asking people. I often ask my knitting groups for suggestions. But that started out as a really concrete idea. This is what I'm making. These are the colors I want. And it is completely morphed into a completely different kind of look. A different sweater. So I did, I had an inspiration, an idea from a picture of this woman in this dress, and it's completely different now. But my testers' colorways are just amazing. The colors they put together and the knitting that they're doing, I can't wait for you guys to see it. I think I will show you all in 2 weeks. It's just really pretty in all the colors. And with 15 testers, I have a ton of options for people to see, and we have people doing the long sleeves and the longer version. But yeah, and that's just one. And now right now I'm designing a pair of fingerless mitts for Miss Babs Yarn, which I talked about briefly. And I wanted to make longer mitts, so I made longer mitts, and then I decided that it should have the shorter mitt version in it too. So then I added the shorter mitt version, so I had to knit another version. And the longer mitts were taking me a little time. And then I sent it to my tech editor, the pattern, and she's like, I really think you needed to do some decreases on the arm before you got to the wrist. well, they're all knit. They're knit already. And they fit fine. They fit great. And she's like, but your numbers for the short mitts are completely different. And that's going to make, you know, a whole different pattern, even though it's the same, it's supposed to be the same pattern. So I had to go in and figure out how to make those changes. The mitts turned out super, they're going to be really nice. And they just went to the test knitters the other day. I think I've talked about my process a lot in the back, and I'm just rambling now. So we'll just move along. This question is probably very overused, but if you could only knit with one weight, brand, and fiber content of yarn for the rest of your life, what would you choose? Or what brand of yarn have you found most enjoyable to knit with? And this is from Naughty Knitter 86, Malabrigo Rios. Right there, worsted. Hundreds of colors. It's a light worsted. It's not too heavy. I love their palette. It has a nice twist. If I had to knit with one weight of yarn, I would pick DK. And the Malabrigo worsted is Rios is pretty close to that. It's a little heavier DK. I've knit a ton of stuff in it. It's a super wash. Their colors are just really saturated, and that just speaks to my soul. So I really enjoy Malabrigo Rios. But I'm not super sure that I would want to knit with superwash for the rest of my life. So I'd probably pick a woolly wool, and probably in a lighter weight, because then you could hold it double forever and you could get a heavier weight. So, you know, you could use a Shetland or like a brown sheep. It has a huge color palette range. For me, that would be the most important thing. How many colors do they provide, right? And so, yeah. But I could knit with Sun Valley Fibers forever, Leading Men Fiber Arts forever, Suburban Stitcher forever, Chelsea Yarns forever. Like some of the indie dyers, they have huge palettes too. I just like a really saturated color. And a lot of them do a lot of pastels and a lot of variegateds, and those aren't my jam. So there you go. That would be my, you know, it's a good question. I think it's really fun. If some of you want to answer in the comments about what your go-to yarn forever and ever would be, that'd be kind of fun for me to read if you'd want to do that. All right, I've just finished listening to a long book I've thoroughly enjoyed, The Covenant of Water by Abram Verghese. I'm finding it hard to start another book as I'm mourning the characters from this last story. Has this ever happened to you or anyone else reading this? And what are your tips on finding the next great read? Timber 2. Yes, this has totally happened to me, where I have just loved a book so much that I want the same book again. Like I want the same reading experience again. And I'm always listening. There are always audiobooks. And so sometimes I do find that after I've listened to a really good one or a couple of good ones in a row, if the next one doesn't grab me right away, I'll want to give it up because it doesn't move me forward as quickly. But what I found recently to help me find books that are compelling is the Instagram book people. The people on Instagram who are reviewing books all the time and showing their top 5, their top 10 for the year. There's also some YouTube videos at the end of every year where people show their top 5, top 3 books of the last year. And those are the ones that I really like to read, is something that people thought was the best of the year. I've started keeping my top ones for this year in my phone that I will do at the end of the year, because I send out, so most of you will know, a Christmas list every year that tells the books that I liked best from the year and my reading list from the entire year. And people wait to get that. People have asked to be on my Christmas list because they want to know those top books. And I thought, well, gosh, if that is something that people want to know, that's how I would like to know it too. I just saw a lady yesterday came in my feed and she's like, these are the top 5 books I've read in the last couple of months. And she held them all up, and 2 of them I had read and 3 of them I hadn't, but I went over to Libby and looked at them right away. And one of them I was like, no, that's not my cup of tea, right? Like if it goes right into like science fiction, fantasy, and I read the descriptor, I will kind of sometimes not want to do it right away. But that is where I really find good top-notch like titles, right? My TBR list in Libby, let me just tell you, I have 412 books in my wish list on Libby. You can only have 15 holds at a time, and then it tells you how soon they're going to get there. But I'm not going to run out of books, 412. But I can go through a lot that don't fit the moment. So then I'll just start reading descriptions until something really hits me. But keeping a list like that in my phone, that helps too. And sometimes just going back to the good old series, the series that you love, that you're going to read them all eventually. That can kind of be a palate cleanser for a book, right? Like right now I went back to a Fanny Flagg because I knew it would be lighthearted and she'd make me laugh, and it's really good. But I've definitely had that happen, Timber. Everybody else can chime in the show notes down below. Just leave a comment for your favorite book of all time, or how you get your next great book read. Like, where do you find your next great book? Okay, the last question of the week. Can you demonstrate the best way to weave in ends for lace? This is Elise KT. Elise, I don't weave in ends on lace very often. I will do a Russian join in lace because otherwise I think it shows. So it depends on the weight of yarn I'm using. But if I'm using a lace weight or a fingering, then I'm going to probably do a Russian join, and you can find a video of that on YouTube where you take a needle and thread and you split the yarn and you kind of wrap the needle and you pull it the other way, and you just get this really kind of clean join. A lot of people do that for everything they knit. If it's a non-superwash wool, I would felt, wet felt it, splice it together. But in my Fixing Mistakes class, I teach weaving in ends as duplicate stitch. So I duplicate stitch my ends on the back side of my fabric. When I was taught to go up on a diagonal and come down on a diagonal. And I find that sometimes that shows through on the front, especially if you're knitting in multiple colors and you're weaving in ends of opposite colors. So I follow the stitches on the back, up two to the right, across, and down two to the left, back up the same, down two, using duplicate stitch. So if I had to weave in ends on lace, that's what I would try to do. I would try to do it on the edges of whatever I'm knitting, and then I would follow it on the back side using duplicate stitch. And that works the best for me. It hides things. You're running with all of the actual stitches, so you're not going against the grain anywhere. It doesn't bleed through to the other side. In the class, I have a white swatch, and I weave in the ends on the back with bright hot pink yarn, and just to show people that how much it doesn't show through on the back. Not that you would ever do that in real life, but that's how I weave in my ends. And there's a lot of controversy around the neatness of weaving in ends, and it depends, and I don't knit a lot of lace weight lace. It's not color work is my thing. And so I don't knit a lot of lace weight lace, to be perfectly honest. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, let's do the sweater of the week this week. We have two of the same sweater. I got two samples back from Jane, and this one is a short, larger size. And it is knit using Cranberry Cream Pie from Chelsea Luxe, Chelsea Yarns, and it with Starlet, which is Leading Men Fiber Art. So these sweaters, AttaGirl sweater, is written for short sleeves or long sleeves and short body or long body. It's our top-down raglan with the same knit stitch for the whole thing. So it's an open stitch pattern. So you can see how open that is there? Yeah. So it's yarn over knit two together for the whole thing. Purl back, yarn over knit two together, and everything just stacks on itself. The sleeves are solid stockinette, so you're doing raglan, and then you do yarn over knit two. Oh, I can't do that with that shoulder. Yarn over knit two together, and then you have a button band and a little stand-up collar. I wear these over my dresses all the time. It is a heavier weight sweater, but I do wear them in the cooler days of summer because it's open work. It's not hot. I don't find it to be hot at all. And I put really, really fun buttons on this one. So I will give a close-up picture of what these buttons are. So this is a size 44 and it's knit on a US 9. So it works up really quickly. So if you have a couple of skeins, 2 or 3, depending on your size, of DK weight yarn in 2 colors or in 1 color, or you have some chunky yarn that you want to hold. I did knit it in an Aran weight yarn and I just knit it in a bigger size, and that's my rainbow striped one that I've worn on the podcast before. But I like teaching in this sweater. I have a little green and yellow one and I wear that with a polka dot dress. And I like teaching in it. I can move in it really easily. I don't always keep it buttoned up, but it's short and easy. Yeah. So yeah, Leading Men Fiber Arts and Chelsea yarn. So this was like a maroon, dark wine color and a hot pink. 2 completely different yarns, and it toned down the hot pink and brightened up the maroon. I thought it would turn out a little bit brighter, but I really like it. And then the second one, knit on a US 9, is Emma's yarn, and that is in her Fun in the Sun colorway, and which is like an orange with yellow in it, and then in her Volume colorway, which is all yellow, so a mostly yellow skein with some white flecks in it. And this is, again, 15 stitches on a 9. This is a size 40, so it's a smaller sample, and it is a little bit longer. I may rip that out and not leave it long. I'll have to see. And I haven't put buttons on it, so I don't always button up these cardigans. So I have buttons picked. I have some, like, I have 4 different orange and yellows laid out to see if I want to put buttons on it, but it used almost 3 skeins of each color, so 6 skeins of yarn to make the longer version. This is a really forgiving sweater as far as fit goes. It's super open and giving, like it stretches almost like a ribbing, right? It just has a lot of give to it. Let's see if I can show you. Like it just has a ton of give. It hangs nicely, but if it, you can get it much more, you can do much more open work on this if you would prefer. So if in doubt, I would definitely go down a size on this sweater, because it is kind of an oversized, meant to be kind of a big long cardigan. The first one we made was like a long sweater version that you could put on over everything. So yeah, that's my AttaGirl sweater. Very fun to knit and a heavyweight yarn. I have a shawl styling video this week. I hadn't recorded some shawl styling videos for a while, and I did some recording, so I have to edit those, but it'll be ready and I'll put it up for my shawl styling Sunday on my Instagram. So I will put that in here for you all to see. I think I have shown this shawl on the podcast before, but I have never shared this tip as to how to wear a shawl with yarn overs. Did anybody else get sucked down the rabbit hole of purchasing a bag from Fiber Hustle after seeing Jody and Tracy of the Grocery Girls and the darling bags that they got? Jody bought them for Tracy, so I bought 2. One's for a friend. Like, why are little things so cute? Like, I don't know why little things are so cute. What could you possibly carry in this, Cori? But I'm gonna set it out. with like something really cute in it. Like maybe candy. Is candy cute? Oh, we don't have candy in the house, but it would fit 2 skeins of yarn and just looks so cute sitting on the mantle. And then this one is actually carryable, and it has this snap at the top, so you can sit it open like a bucket and just have it sitting next to your chair. Boy, I just had to buy him. Like right away, I went right over. He didn't have any in stock, so I commented on his Instagram and said, are you guys gonna make more of those? And he goes, no, we're all doing fall colors now. He said, if we have more fabric, I can get a couple made. And I didn't. I thought, well, I said, you know, that's fine. I'm kind of late to the party here. And then he got back to me. He's like, hey, we can have them made this week. How many do you want and what size? So they must have just enough fabric. I said, well, I like the chipette and the chippy or something. This is called Chip Basket and Chipette, I think. I have a new design coming out. I have so many things on the needles. And so the Pretty Boxes sweater is going to come out at the end of September, mid to end of September, for the Vermont Sheep and Wool Festival and Rhinebeck. And so the samples will go to the booths with Michelle of Woolens and Nosh, and then I will get them back, but those are coming out. Then my fingerless mitts, the Pinky Swear mitts are coming out. The 2 hats that I'm going to talk about next are coming out, and also the hood, the Great Bear hood, will be coming out probably October-ish, maybe right before I have my surgery, so that I just don't have to put the pattern live after I have my surgery. We'll just have to see. October is early probably for a winter hood with fur on it, but at this point, I put my blankets out in August. I just have to get some of this stuff done. Everything's revolving around being laid up for 8 weeks. And then I have a shawl design to do for the late fall with Lavender Loon. And I have to get that all done by the end of September. So I've just been, I spent from 10 in the morning yesterday, 9:30 in the morning yesterday until 5:30 in the afternoon. We went to supper, we came back home, we watched some of the Minnesota Vikings football game, and then I went back in at 9 p.m. and worked until 10:30, and then I came out and knit from 10:30 until 1:30 because I'm just trying to get it all done. And we're leaving on vacation on Wednesday, and I don't want to take design work and test knitting stuff along on vacation. I want to have 5 days where I'm not having to design on vacation or knit a design on vacation, or have to actually take those projects. So I'm letting my test knitters know that I'm going to try to be offline, because it's just a pain to be answering questions when you're not at home and you don't have your computer, and I don't want to bring all the patterns with me. So anyway, it's been a little crazy. I have 2 hats coming out. I had this idea a year ago, and I knit this hat for a little boy, and I gave it to him. And then I said to myself, you have to write that up, and I never did it. So when I was talking to Michelle in April of Woolens and Nosh about the sweater, I said, would you be interested in letting me knit these 2 hats with your bulky yarn? And she said, sure. And she said, what colors do you want? And she sent me 2 colors. And so I knit a bobber hat and a buttons hat. And I think they're darling. So I knit the bobber hat, and the prototype, it's a little off. It's not quite tall enough, so I have to rip back the top, but I got pictures taken, so I'm going to put that in for you all to see here. And then I knit the buttons hat, and these are just easy to knit, bulky weight hats for kids, like a last minute project, but then you embellish them with buttons. And so I went on Etsy and I bought a ton of buttons. And you guys know I have a huge button collection. So I found these little red fish on Etsy. They were super cute. Put those on the bobber hat. And then I got my bobbers from Amazon for $2.88. And then I went out and just looked at what kind of buttons would kids want. Like when Kylie had a button collection when she was growing up, she wanted like all the farm animals, and then she, you know, every time she'd go to a yarn store with mom or Joann's or Michael's, she'd get a button or a package of buttons. And she had this box that she'd keep them in. Then when her friends would come over, from the time she was probably 4 or 5, you know, old enough to not put them in her mouth, until she was probably, I don't even know, 10, they would play, they would sort by color, they would make roads with ribbon and yarn, and they would make pastures and put the animals in. So she had zoo animals and horses and all. I mean, she just had, so if you have grandchildren or children, a button box is, you know, a super fun thing. And if you're at a yarn store all the time, it was something that she could just purchase and I could buy for $1, right? And she could pick out a button or two, and she picked pretty ones, sparkly ones like, and so these are some of the different buttons that I found. I found the butterflies, and then the farm animals, and then little tiny red fish and blue anchors. And then I think this one will be super popular, the pandas. And then the monsters. So those can be sewn onto either of the hats. The bobber hat has a wave stitch pattern on it, and the buttons hat has the squares. So you can put buttons inside all the squares or none of the squares. You know, you can kind of make it your own. But I think if a kid was looking at the hat, they would think it would be kind of fun, especially young kids. So I started with baby, size baby, and then toddler, and then went to like kid, teen, and then I also have an adult size. Not that I think anyone, but I think it would be funny to make Ross the bobber hat for Christmas. You could take the bobber off and then you could just wear the blue hat, but I think it would be funny to unwrap the bobber hat. And there would be some guys that would wear it, right? Ross would not wear it, but. And then, you know, if you have somebody who's really into something and you find buttons, right? Like if you have a kid that's into sharks and you find shark buttons, you know, or an adult, or, and I'm even thinking like a disabled kid or an older person that loves collecting cars, and you put cars all over a hat. I just was thinking, you know, it'd be really fun. And then I was like, not everybody has bulky weight yarn. Not everyone wants to knit with bulky weight yarn. I should probably knit this hat out in worsted. So now yesterday I spent the day writing 2 worsted weight hat patterns. It's the same pattern, just a completely different gauge. So then you have to cast on more stitches, and decreases have to be more because you have more stitches on. And I was going to combine them in one pattern, so I was going to have this all together, the buttons and the bobbers together, and the bulky and the worsted. And it was just, and I'm doing all this extra work now, and I thought, you know what? I am not selling this as one pattern. It is taking me, you know, I'm going to have multiple samples, so now it's going to come out in separate pieces. So I hope that you guys think those are as cute as I think. I was also thinking that some people collect like pins from different places, right? And that might be kind of a fun like hat to wear if you have state park pins, or if you have places that you visited and you have little pins from that, or if kids were collecting some type of pin that might be easy to put on there. What have I been watching lately? I finished the show The Bear. Ross gave up on it. He thought it was just too loud and crazy, and the second season gets much better as far as that goes, like the intensity of the 40 minutes. I really like Jeremy Allen, who was in Shameless. I think he does a really good job in this show. It's all about, you know, him being a really good chef and going back to run like a deli in Chicago. So that was very good. And then I watched a show called Land. So this woman loses her husband and her child, which you don't know right away. And she decides to sell all of her belongings and go live up on a mountaintop. So Edie, in the aftermath of an unfathomable event, finds herself unable to stay connected to the world and retreats to the wilds of the Rockies. After a local hunter brings her back from the brink of death, she must find a way to live again. Like, she can't make it. She is not prepared well. It gets super cold. She does not hunt. She fishes, but she just doesn't have her act together to go out there and do that. but she's grieving, right? And it was all takes place in this cabin, mostly with her, and the scenery is beautiful. It was like a 2-hour movie, and it was on Freevee, Freevee, and that's where I watched it. And I just pulled it up on my iPad and then streamed it over, hit the arrow and streamed it over to my TV. I'm not really sure how that whole thing works, but it was very good. Then I watched the show News of the World with Tom Hanks, where he is tasked with returning a young girl who was abducted by the Indians and then recovered back to her family, and her family is all dead. And so they go to take her back to relatives who do not really want her, but they don't treat her well. But she and Tom Hanks developed this rapport. I read the book, and so I wanted to watch the movie. Then I finished watching Alone, and the guy that won is not the guy I wanted to win. But then I talked to someone at Knitting about it, and she kind of set me straight. She was like, no, he was just playing on everyone's emotions by saying that about his autistic son the whole time. And I was like, oh, he totally played on my emotions. He kept saying he needed to win the money for his son, to do his son, and so we're all rooting for him. And they all have something they want to win the money for. The guy that won deserved to win. He caught way more food and fish, but they were all quite emaciated by the end, because none of them ever catch big game. They all go out with this bow and arrow and thought that they're going to get a moose or a bear or something, and they don't. They end up eating squirrels and rabbits, and if they can get them, and fish. So I love that show. Then I watched kind of a Hallmark movie called A Love Yarn. It was so cute. Oh, and she's a yarn store in Australia. You guys have to go watch it. It's just lovely. And I watched that on the Roku channel. So again, went on the Roku app on my iPad, put in my email, started playing on my iPad, and flipped it over to my TV. So I didn't pay for it. And it was easy peasy. And it got like 6.3 out of 10 stars. If you're a knitter, it's really good. They have a knitting contest. They're talking about wool. There's a yarn mill. It is our movie. So I love yarn. Go watch it. And I watched Epic Family Road Trip on YouTube. It's a family who lives a year on a remote island in the Canadian wilderness. It's a 2-hour documentary, and there are 3 kind of grownish children and their parents who have a cabin that needs to be winterized. And they've been traveling in southern climes for years. And then they decided they wanted to try to live a year at this cabin in the North Woods. And it was very good. It's, they videoed it all themselves and put it up on YouTube. So I like those kind of shows where they're doing they're fixing up houses and they're doing outdoor work and they're showing what it's like to live in the wilderness. Something I will never do. Okay, an aside. We had a dinner party Friday night for 12 people from my husband's work because one of their members is leaving. He and his wife are going to travel for a year with their 2 kids, their 2 boys. She's originally from Spain, and they're going to go to Europe and New Zealand, and they're just taking these 2 boys for a year because if you ever have a chance, to do that kind of thing. And so they were saying goodbye to this guy that they all really like. And they all came over, and we had a taco bar, and we had all the fixings and corn cake and corn and bean salsa and several kinds of salsa and, all the toppings and chicken and beef and hard shells and soft shells and salad bowls, whatever they want to make. So it was pretty easy, and was quite a bit of cooking, but it was pretty easy to have everything there. And then, 2 little kids came along. 2 of the workers talked, and they didn't want to leave their kids home, and they said, well, I'll bring mine if you bring yours. And Ross is like, that's absolutely fine, right? Well, then the little kids wanted to play with Chevy, and they wanted to see the house, and they wanted to go out in the backyard, and they were like 6 and 8. So we ended up giving tours of the house, which was funny because they hadn't, you don't always bring over and let people see all the parts of your house. But I was like, you can see my yarn, right? Like, you can see my office. You can see we went upstairs, which I never go upstairs in this house because the master's on the main floor. I've talked about this before. And both spare bedroom beds weren't made because we had company. We washed the sheets. We threw them on the bed up there. They're not made up. I was like, well, this is how we live. Kylie's bed was made, but I think it just has a quilt on it because no one slept in that room forever. And the kids were so excited to see the playroom and the bathrooms. I don't know, it's just, and then, they were talking about the garage, and then one of the ladies says, well, I've never seen Ross's garage. And this group has been here. Some of these people have been here before for our dinner parties. And someone said, you've not seen Ross's garage? And my husband has a very tidy garage, He has shelving on wheels, and he hoses it down, and it's very clean. He put 2 windows in the garage. So, so we went out there, and she was just like, of course, this is Ross's garage, because he's such a tidy guy and neatnik, And we went out into the backyard, and the kids wanted to throw the Frisbee, and then they each wanted to walk Chevy on the leash. Well, Chevy doesn't know how to walk on the leash yet, right? Like, he can do it, but he's not great at it. And they're little kids, and he's big dog now, 40, 50 pounds, right? And so he weighs as much as they do. So we're walking around the yard, and Ross and I are being, right there to make sure that he doesn't jump up on anybody or whatever. And then everybody starts following us out. And in our backyard, down on the back, we have a little fire pit with some stone benches. And I have a rock wall in my backyard that we had built when we first. So we have a crude oil line that runs through the back half of our backyard. It runs through our entire neighborhood. And you cannot plant trees within 25 feet of either side of the crude oil line. So we have this white pipe in the middle of the line, and then we have an acre of sod back there because you can't plant trees. We could plant some small things like flowers and stuff, but it's just easier to mow if it's just flat and you don't have to go around stuff. And, we have space up by the house. But we have this fire pit, and then we started putting in this stone wall, and we had the landscapers build this long, kind of beautiful stone wall. And I always wanted to put a couple more, and we just never got around to it. And then we have a horseshoe pit back there. So we have a actual, lumber and there were plans, landscape plans at the time to build like a really tall swing back there, and some trellises, and you take your budget and you you mark things off. But we have a beautiful space back there. And everyone kind of started gathering, and I'm like, I don't know where the horses are. They're in the garage. We could go get them if you guys. It was a beautiful evening, and the kids are running around playing with Chevy, and people are kind of thinking that they want to leave and get going. You can tell that it's gonna, and they're like, oh my gosh, do you guys just sit out here all the time in the backyard with your wine and you're glad? Well, we don't. We haven't been out there since Kylie was in high school because I don't like the outdoors. So I said this to all of them. I'm like, I don't like the hot. I don't like the bugs. I am not an outdoor person. Like, I walk at the dog park and I can tolerate it for the 45 minutes because it's pretty. But I just don't love, like, I don't sit on my deck. I have a bench in the front. I don't sit out there and knit. I sit inside in the air conditioning. Ross and I don't eat outside. We don't eat when we go out to dinner. We don't eat outside. Like, if they get, inside or out, we always say in. Like, we're just not those people, right? And several of them are like, this is so beautiful, because there are some pretty trees in our neighbor's yard and then up closer to the house. And so it's shaded. I'll try to take pictures, video, put in here. It's really pretty, but they all started laughing at me. Like, they were like, you are so honest. Like, who? And I'm like, no, I just want to go in the house and take off my bra. In front of my husband's coworkers. He was not right there. Hey, Kevin. And everybody laughed. But I just blurted it out. I'm like, no, we do not spend time out here. We should. We're so fortunate to have this space. The fire pit is fairly close to the house. It's not far enough back, probably. And so we would come home from a soccer game, and Kylie would say, can we have a fire and do some s'mores? And Ross, I would say, 80% of the time would say, no, it's too windy. Like, it's always windy in Minnesota because we're flat. And and you know, a spark or an ember on the roof, you have a fire problem, right? And so, and we have a hose out there, but we just said no a lot. So we never really got used to like having a fire every night. It's just a big job, and you have to kind of stay up and tend it. You know, my parents' house burned down when I was in college from a fire in their fireplace. So like, this is a total tangent. But I just, I blurted, I'm just not an outdoor person. So the fact that I watch all these shows, see how I circled all the way back around? The fact that I watch all these shows that are all about survival in the wilderness, it's like a complete, because one of them said, oh yeah, I asked Ross if you guys ever go camping, and he was like, oh no, Cori doesn't camp. I totally camped growing up. We had a pop-up trailer. We camped, we ran around, swam in the lake. I wouldn't camp now. I wouldn't want to go camping now. I don't want to hike now. And we're going to go to Maine and I have to hike. I can do it, but it isn't what I generally would choose. I don't know. The last thing I watched, let's get off this. I watched the new Sinead O'Connor documentary called Nothing Compares. Sinead O'Connor passed away at the beginning of the year, and I'm not sure they ever had a cause of death. It wasn't suspicious at the time, but she had depression, mental health. She had been hospitalized for mental health. She had drug abuse issues. Her son, who was 17, had committed suicide in 2022. So but they said it just wasn't suspicious, but someone had told me that it was interesting. I was not a Sinead O'Connor fan. I didn't even know much of her music, but the Nothing Compares to You song, I think everybody recognizes. And it was really interesting, the way she was treated and the things she did to stand up for human rights and human abuses that got her in trouble with the media. Yeah, so if you're into kind of biography, stuff like that, it was a really good documentary that I watched last night. And then there's a new podcaster out there. She's called Emma in the Moment. There are 100 new podcasts out there. Everyone's doing a knitting podcast. Now would not be a good time to launch a new knitting podcast if you want to be found, because there are so many. But this one is not I'm going to show you my whips, my finished objects, my works in progress, my knitting yarn that I bought. This is a woman who is talking about drama in the crafting world. Really interesting. So Emma in the Moment, the one that I watched, and now I'll go back and watch some others, was about a woman, a designer, who accused a yarn shop and another designer of stealing one of her designs. And so she tells the whole story and the drama that happened and how people went over and harassed this yarn store after this designer called them out. And then it kind of turned out that that wasn't really the case at all. And they kind of got proven wrong. And then they all had to kind of come to terms. But it's all about different things that are happening in the knitting and crafting industry. So it was different, completely different than anything I'd ever seen. It was good. Things I saw on the internet. I have 2 things to share with you. There's a book out called Hunt, Gather, Parent: What Ancient Cultures Can Teach Us About the Lost Art of Raising Happy, Helpful Little Humans by Michaeline Dowcliffe. And I saw this on Instagram. A woman was talking about it in her feed and how it changed completely the way she parents and is raising her children. So I went over and read the reviews. It looked really good. I'm not raising children right now, but I thought it would be a good gift for someone who might be. So I texted my niece who just had a little baby. I said, no, you don't have time to read right now. But she's also a social worker and works with mothers, single mothers. So I thought she might be interested in that. So if any of you are grandparents or parents looking for books that help with parenting, I thought I would just share it. The book is Hunt, Gather, Parent. And then I saw this beautiful crocheted flower blanket. And I want to learn how to crochet so I can make it, because it is so awesome It's just all the happy colors. And I thought, oh man, it's so cool. It came up on my Instagram feed and I took a picture of it. I take 100 pictures a day of things that I see. And then I go back in and clean out my phone and say, why did you take a picture of this? But yeah, it's just really pretty. So I wanted to share that. Special things I have to tell you this week. We are going to have a knit along. So the library knitting group, the group of knitters that I taught, most of them I taught how to knit, are going to knit Mama Krista's feather and fan shell. 3 or 4 of them decided that they're going to knit that shell. And I wore it on the podcast recently, and it's a great little first top to start with. It's feather and fan, which is a 1-row repeat of knit 2 together yarn overs, and then you knit, purl, knit, and then you do it again. So it's super simple. And then the pattern is written to be 2 rectangles where you seam and then you leave the armhole open and you just pick up and do some, I don't even think you pick up, I think you actually do some purl stitches at the neckline. So it's just a vest, a shell. It's very flattering. It's quite cute to wear. I did mine striped. It could be done solid. It's knit in DK weight yarn, kind of a heavy DK. I knit mine in cotton. And so I'm going to do a knit along with them. Like I'm going to help them knit it because none of these 3 women have ever knit a sweater. And so we're going to start on September 12th. And then I thought I should have anybody join us that wants to join us. And then I'll give away some prizes. So I typed up an email, a beginner knitter, sweater knitter email, and sent it to the 3 of them and said, this is how we're going to get started. You need to find yarn, get your needles out, do a swatch, watch your swatch. I gave all this information. And then they responded to this long email with a couple of questions. So then I responded back. And on Tuesday, we are going to 2 yarn shops and they're going to pick out yarn and they're going to try on my sweater. We're going to measure something that they already have. My sweater's going to be too big for a couple of them, but, and they're going to do their swatches and they're going to do their swatches in the round because instead of knitting ours in pieces and seaming it, we're just going to knit it in the round. That's the way I knit mine. And then you don't have any wrong side rows. So I think that'll just be fine. So I copied and pasted those 2 emails into the IROCKNITTERS Ravelry group thread. And it's at the top and it says Mama Krista Knit Along. And Mama Krista is Stephen B's mother who passed away a year ago. And she had a yarn store in Wisconsin. So Stephen B grew up in a yarn store. And she had this kind of a grocery store on the corner, like on a 4-corner back road in the middle of Wisconsin that was full of yarn his whole life growing up. And so then he moved her to the Twin Cities. Once he got established here, he moved her over here and then she lived with him in her last years. And she was often at the shop. And she had knit hundreds of these shells. She didn't have a pattern. She just cast on, knit, feather, and fan. And so they finally made her write it down. And it's published under the Stephen B company. So it's like a 2-page pattern, front and back, like super simple, easy to knit. And if you've never knit a sweater, this is like very forgiving because you don't have to fit the sleeves. There are like 5 sizes. They're pretty spread out because the repeat for a feather and fan stitch is 18 stitches. So each of the pattern sizes have to go by 18 because you can't have a half a stitch pattern on this sweater. So there are some limitations there, but it's like this fabric. Feather, it's so forgiving. It's like an accordion, right? So it will fit you. If you want to join us, you can knit it in any yarn you like, as long as you get gauge. The information for how to get started, and then we'll start on September 12th. I'm meeting with them for an hour before their actual knitting group. We're going to get everybody kind of cast on and going as long as their swatches are worked out and I can count their stitches and stuff. And then we'll just see how long it takes. I'm not going to put an end date on this. The problem with it is that I'm having my surgery, right? And so we will get a few weeks in and then I'll have to take at least a couple of weeks off. And then I'm assuming that they will probably come out to my house at some point while I'm recovering, because I'll be I mean, I'll be fine. I just can't move my arm away from my body for 6 weeks. So you're in a sling and you're not allowed to move your arm away from your body. You can move your hand, but not. So I don't think I'll be knitting for a couple weeks. We'll see. Kind of have to see how it goes. If you want to join us, I thought that might be kind of fun for anybody who wants to knit a feather and fan shell. Go out and sign up for my newsletter. Will you go to my website, IROCKKNITTERS.com. On the front page is a box and you put your first name and your email in it. You hit send and then you get an email from me saying, did you want to subscribe to this? And then you say yes. And then you are subscribed. And then I send out a newsletter every time I have a new pattern out, and the pattern will have a coupon code in it. So right now I am running a code because yesterday, Saturday, was National Dog Day. And I have dog patterns, 2 dog patterns. The Dogwarts hat and the Dogwarts cowl. So I sent out a newsletter that said, hey, you can get those 2 patterns for $5. Use the coupon code DOGS on Ravelry. But it's already marked down on my website and on Etsy. But just buy it on Ravelry. Unless you're not on Ravelry, just buy it on Ravelry because then it's in your library and it doesn't matter to me where you buy it. So you would have gotten that coupon. And then a week ago or 2 weeks ago when I put out the blankets, you would have gotten a coupon code for that. And now I have all these new patterns coming up. And so go get on my newsletter list. I do not send a newsletter for any other reason. I just send it when I have a new release and I give you first dibs on like the coupon codes because I don't always remember to share them everywhere. Sometimes I share them in my Ravelry group. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I share them on the podcast. Sometimes I don't. But I always send the newsletter. So go put your email in there. I have a thought of the week this week. I was talking to someone the other day and they were going to share a sad story about something. And they said to me, do you have the mental space to hear this right now? And it was a lovely moment. Like, that is a really nice thing to do to someone. If you're going to share a bad, terrible situation, a negative opinion, a thought that you have, it might be nice to say to the person, can you deal with me talking right now? Like, can you take this on? Like, you might have something going on in your life where you just don't need to hear about someone else's miscarriage or someone else's bad situation or someone else's cancer diagnosis or someone else's child that has like, you never know what's going on in other people's lives, even though they're your friends, right? Like I have friends that don't know what's going on with me all the time. And it was such a blessed thing to say to someone, to just give them the option to say, you know what? I don't. Can we talk about it another time? Yeah, sure. Just lovely. Do you have the mental space for this right now? Is a real kindness. Really nice. Especially if you're a dumper. Like if you have something negative to say, if you are going to complain about something and I can be kind of a complainer. Like I can be like this happened to me and this happened to me and, somebody did this and Ross did that or whatever. And sometimes you just can't sit next to that, right? You just can't listen to someone kind of dump their bad stuff on you because you were already down and you just need a break from that, right? And not that everybody always has to be up and happy all the time, but I just thought it would be something I would share. Okay, so I told you guys that we all went fishing up north. Ross caught 6 walleye, and fishing was slow. But we stayed in one of the front cabins that had 3 bedrooms, which we did not need, but they had a cancellation. And they knew that Ross wanted to come up again, and so they just let him know. But we had a view of the water. So I'm going to put in a little video that I took while I was up there of the resort. I've shared videos of this resort before. It's right on the mouth of the lake at the end of the river. So the Mississippi River flows into Lake Winnebagosh, which is a dammed up lake that was years ago. And it's a giant lake. It's really, really big. I can look, but it's like 5 miles long or whatever, you know. It's not just one of our little ponds. And so we're looking out at the river, and then right at the end of the resort is where it completely opens out to the lake. So they don't get the bad lake weather and waves and stuff when it's really crazy out there, because they're just tucked in to this kind of like a cove. And then there's another resort just up from them, and they were having a fishing contest. It was the National Walleye end of the season pro tour championship. Like it was big. Ross is out there. He came in on Saturday morning. He's like, oh my gosh, the boats, like the fanciest boats, right? And guys are fishing and they're weighing and they're keeping fish. And it was a 2-day tournament. And apparently Friday when we drove up, because I had to teach a class on Friday afternoon, so I need to thank my friends Mary and John for giving me a ride to Stillwater on that Friday afternoon, because it's across the city. And I was teaching from 2:30 to 5:30, and then we wanted to leave and go straight up to the lake. But if I had to drive back all the way across the city, it's about an hour to home during rush hour, and then we left and went up to the lake, we wouldn't have gotten in until 1 a.m. So I put out a distress call, and said, does anybody want to go to Stillwater? And Stillwater is a river town. It's a beautiful downtown, lots to do. And Mary and John said, yeah, we'll go spend the afternoon in Stillwater. So they picked me up and drove me over there. And then Ross came over at 5:30 and picked me up, and we headed up to the lake. And so we got up there by 10 o'clock at night. It was perfect. It was like lovely. We pulled in like 10:20. Yeah, that was really nice of them. But this whole fishing championship thing was going on, and Ross was watching them catch fish, and then he was, following them, like, where are the fish biting? Where are they catching? And Ross has a new sonar computer to tell you where the highs and lows in the bottom of the lake are and stuff, and how deep it is. But they have the fancy ones. And so on Saturday afternoon, the wives some of them were staying at, and children of these fishermen were staying at our resort, and they were waiting for them to come in, and they're doing the weigh-ins and all of that, and they catch whoever catches the most fish, and then they release them all, can win. And the grand prize was like $100,000 or $500,000. I mean, it was so Ross really enjoyed it, and it was kind of fun to see all the people, and it ended up being really neat. The boats were super fancy fishing boats, and that was really nice. But on Saturday night, we went out to dinner. And about 15 minutes down the road on Highway 2, between, like, if you're from Minnesota, between like Grand Rapids and Bena, is a supper club. It's only open for like Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights in the summer. It's called the Big Fish. And they have this giant fish out front that you can stand inside the mouth of and have your picture taken. We've taken pictures there over the years as Kylie was little and grew up. And several years ago, we took Kylie and Stevie. And they have like roasted chicken and walleye and sandwiches. And we didn't want to pack a whole bunch of food for the 2 nights. And the lodge at the resort, it's like, when I say resort, I think like luxury, right? This is a fishing resort, right? This is not fancy. They have a lodge that has a pool table in it, and they have a pool, but it's 50 years old, right? And the cabins have all been remodeled, but they're old. They have like pretty wood panel, like that really light wood paneling on the inside, those boards. I can't think of the name. Pine paneling. Anyway, and they have window air conditioners, and there's a TV. They have a satellite. But like it's pretty remote. We are miles from the nearest town, but we drove to the Big Fish, and Ross and I both decided to get the roasted chicken, and they have a little salad bar, which has bags of shredded lettuce, tomatoes, cottage cheese, and maybe 4 kinds of dressing, bacon bits. Like this is not a fancy place either. Nice bar, but the food is very good. So we're sitting there eating our chicken, and I get a chicken bone caught in my throat. And I didn't know what it was. I had eaten a piece of the skin, And I thought that the skin was just cracking, you know, scratching the back of my throat. And I could breathe fine, but it hurt so bad and it wasn't going down. So I ate a piece of bread, like a bite of bread, and it didn't move. And I was afraid I was gonna throw up because I was not choking. I could say to Ross, I have something stuck, right? Like I wasn't choking, but it was stuck. And so I got up from the table and I went outside to the side of the restaurant and stuck my finger down my throat. And I could like feel that it wasn't moving. And I thought, I'm gonna have to stick my finger down there further and get it, or I'm gonna push it down. And I reached down with my fingernail and I got it up. And it was huge. Like it was long and thicker than anything I expected to have been in, you know, part of the skin or part of the chicken that I was eating. I didn't even see it as I was eating it. It was really scary. I coughed and got sick and coughed and got sick, and I scratched my throat. And Ross came out and he's standing there and he's mortified. And I kept saying, you know, like, I'm okay because I was breathing. I just couldn't, you know, I got it. And then I, you know, threw it on the ground and I stood up and my eyes were watering. You know, it was just such a scary moment. Just such a scary moment. You know, and I know people will say you shouldn't have left the restaurant, but you know, there were tons of people in there, and I wouldn't, if I had been choking, I would not have left. If I couldn't breathe, I would have let someone know and like done the Heimlich or whatever, but it was just long enough that it was, I feel like it was on a diagonal and I got my finger down far enough. It was so scary. I don't know why I'm telling you this. Maybe just like be careful with chicken. I just have a bad memory, you know. It was just like, oh, what were you doing? Like not paying attention or what? Like how can that happen? I mean, I can see it happening with fish because those fish bones are translucent sometimes, right? And they can be really long, but they're like, they look like a piece of thread sometimes. But this was a bone, like it was sharp. And so then I had a scratchy throat for several days, kind of a cough, and yeah, but I'm fine. My view this afternoon. And right over there is where the river goes into the lake. Giant lake. Great big giant lake. Winnebagosh. And then the birds just sitting out there on the water. And it's very calm. And these are the 3 little cabins. This is the one we're staying in there. There's the lodge. Here are the swings where you can just sit and look out at the water. And then this is one of the carvings. So this is the other beautiful carving. So a year ago, last March, the husband owner of this resort was on a fishing adventure and got out to help a car that was stranded along the highway and was hit and killed. And so his wife and son and daughter-in-law now own the resort and run it, but Craig was just an amazing guy, and so they had these made and built in his memory and honor. This is my little cabin from the other direction. They had a cancellation, and so this is a 3-bedroom cabin, and Ross was making reservations to come up fishing in September, and they told him that the weekend was open. And so he said, Cori, do you want to go fishing? And I said, no, I don't want to go fishing, but I will go knitting at the lake. So here we are. The last little Cori story before we go today is my mom had a terrible fall. Marge, Grandma Marge, you know, she had her shoulder replaced in May, and she's had, this is maybe 31 surgeries of different replacement body parts and things that have happened to Mom. You know, she has very bad degenerative arthritis, so she's had multiple replacements, and back surgery, neck surgery, back fusion, repeated, you know, foot surgery, bunion surgery, toe surgery, and then redo it, And she got up Saturday morning a week or so ago and was dizzy and she's often that way. So she sits on the edge of the bed and she waits. My dad was still sleeping, and she just waits, and then she gets up and touches the closet like she has a plan. And she went out to the kitchen, she made hot chocolate, and then she went into the family room and she was going to put her footies on her feet. And the next thing she knew, she was in front of the fireplace and she had hit the fireplace, falling down. Now, in hindsight, she passed out, but she didn't think she passed out. And I said, well, Mom, you didn't fall off the couch putting your footies onto the carpet and do this much damage. So she slit her nose open, has stitches in her nose, abrasions all over her face, 2 black eyes. She hit the fireplace mantle, what's at the base where you sit? The hearth. It's raised and it's stone at their house, like rough stone. Their old fireplace is rough stone. And she took all the skin off of her arm, and she has super, super, fine skin. So she has done, and so, and she displaced her left knee replacement. So she's in bad shape. She went in dripping blood to my dad and woke him up, which, freaked him out. He got dressed, took her to the ER, and they have to check everything because she has so many body parts, right? Like that are not hers, that they have to check her head to see if she had a TIA or a stroke or whatever. So she did not break anything else, but she's wrapped from her wrist to her underarm to keep this on. And they said that's going to take forever to heal. It's as big as a 3x5 card that she took the skin off. Her nose, she's draining, but her glasses didn't break, but I think that's what cut her nose open. And then her knee is terrible. So they had to send her to an orthopedic specialist. So they went there on Monday. She walked into the orthopedic specialist on a broken knee replacement. It's swollen. It's huge. But she's so tough. And he said, you should not be able to walk on this. I've looked at the x-rays and you shouldn't be walking on this. And she said, well, yeah, I can walk on it. So she's in a brace from her ankle to her groin. They have to fix the replacement. It broke, so he talked about putting some type of wedge in it, but it's a partial knee replacement on that side. It's what I have on my right is a partial and my left is a full. And she had a partial on her left, and otherwise they'll have to do a full. So they'll take the one out and put the new one in. She finished physical therapy for her shoulder on Tuesday. And she and Dad went and got Culver's because she had done 12 weeks of physical therapy, and she did twice a week, and she was so tired getting up in the morning and getting ready and going to physical therapy for her shoulder. And on Saturday she fell. I mean, my mom just can't catch a break. It's such a bummer. I feel so bad. And I said, do you need me to come? No. And they didn't call us on Saturday. They called us on Monday. And she said, well, there's nothing to tell you until we went to the orthopedic surgery. Yes, there is. You just tell me. And she said, I knew if I call you, we'd both just cry. Oh, I just felt so bad. Yeah. And so she said, we don't have a plan yet. We don't know. And I'm fine. Like now I'm, all bandaged up. And then she sent pictures. So I'll put pictures in, but if that kind of thing freaks you out, don't look. They'll be here for like 5 seconds. But first is her face, and then is her knee, which is black. Completely, it's just this huge black thing. But I don't think you can understand how, I didn't understand how bad it was until she sent the pictures. And this is 2 or 3 days later. Now that everything's draining down, so she's getting more and more black and blue. And she's just really bummed. Like, she has to go in to get a pre-op physical now and have another surgery. And, oh, it's just the worst. And then I said, you know, I'm teaching a class, and then I'm going to and I had a dentist appointment, and I had like 3 or 4 things in the next few days, and she said, no, don't come. I can't go anywhere. I can't do anything. Go to the lake. And so we did. And then, you know, we came back, and then I said, I was calling her every day. I don't think she was loving that, but I was FaceTiming her and calling her every day, and she's like, no, we're just waiting. We have to hear. And then they can do the surgery September 6th, which this happened a couple of weeks ago. She's in pain. I just couldn't understand why they couldn't do the surgery sooner. I don't know. And then, so she called me yesterday. She went back into the urgent, orthopedic urgent, because her knee is way more painful. She's been walking on it. It's swollen. It's more swollen. It's red. It's inflamed. It's warm to the touch. They thought she might have an infection. They sent her to the dentist because she had an infected tooth before. She's not supposed to go to the dentist after replacement surgery. They pulled a tooth. It wasn't infected. She's just been through the ringer. So she's really down. She said, can you just listen to your mother? You know, she asked me, is it okay if I just, you know, I said, yeah. But we had this dinner party on Friday night, and so I just haven't gotten down there. And then I thought I should go today. But, I have the podcast, and then Chevy's getting shots, and I have these knitters I'm taking to the yarn store on Tuesday. I could change all of that, but she kept saying, no, don't come, and you're going to Maine. Just go to Maine. So I'm going to go as soon as we get back. I'm going to go. I should have just gone and sat with her, but, you know, you just feel... She's like, I can't go anywhere anyway. I'm just crabby. Your dad's putting up with me. I'm just crabby because I can't. And she's just not a good sitter. You know, she's just not good at staying home. She took the brace off. She wrapped it with an ace. She went to the store and bought an anniversary card just to get out of the house. She probably can't do any more damage, but then now it's hurt worse. And so they went back in. They took an x-ray. He said it looks like the piece is upside down. And this was the PA because the doctor's out of town until Monday. Oh, you know, you never know what people have going on in their lives, right? You just never know. It's just such a bummer. So that's your last Cori story. Keep her in your prayers. I have 3 audiobooks this week. I haven't been listening to as much because I've been on the computer so much writing patterns. I listened to Plagued by Quilt by Molly McRae. Boy, do I like those stories. You know, it's this yarn shop in this small town. A murder always happens, something happens, and then they all get together and try to solve the problem. They're really well done. The characters are well drawn out, and lots of the same characters. You know, there's the baker and all of her friends, and the sheriff who doesn't like her because she can solve the mysteries before he does. They're just good. Then I listened to Drunk on Love by Jasmine Guillory. This is about a winery in California, a Black-owned business. The brother and sister are running it. She goes to the bar one night where her best friend is the bartender. She has not had a date in a really long time. The bartender tries to get her to talk to this guy. They have a fling. He becomes the employee at the winery the next day that she didn't know about. That's how it all starts. It's really good. You know, it's kind of a Hallmark romance because you know they're going to get together. But it's all about making wine and his life before he quit a tech company, and her life and her trying to live up to her uncle's expectations. Yeah, And then I went to Fanny Flag. The whole town's talking. This is 100 years of this town. It starts way back in time when the settlers were settling the town, and then they decided to make a town, and how they invested in the community and the farmers, and how they got together and, you know, built a downtown and ordered these prefab buildings and made a church, and then their descendants and their descendants, and you follow. And it's funny and heart bending. What's the word? It's just a lovely story about this town and the people in it, and, you know, the births and the deaths, and then there's this whole piece where they are, if you're buried in the cemetery, you go to heaven or wherever that place would be. It's just a plate, and they're all still there, and so they meet one another and they greet one another when they arrive, and then they say, you know, how are things with you? And so they have there's this whole community of people who have passed who still talk to one another and wait for their loved ones to come, and it's just lovely. So those are the 3 audiobooks this week. Let's do the giveaway. I am giving away the books from last week. So the books from last week are Knit Your Own Norwegian Sweaters, 55 Christmas Balls to Knit, Folk Shawls, Jameson's Shetland Knitting Book, and For the Love of Knitting. So that is the stack of these books that I showed last week right here. It's pretty heavy, so I will ship this book rate. If you win one of my prizes going forward and you are out of the country, Canada or Europe or somewhere else, I will gift you a pattern instead of shipping this stuff, because it just gets to be too expensive. So Sharon Elrich, you are the winner, and the code word was cars, and you would rather be the passenger, but you're always the driver. And a lot of you would much rather be the passenger so you can knit. But some of you like to not ride with people who aren't good drivers. So that was interesting. And there were a lot of comments about this time. But you had to use the word car, and then I did the random pickawinner.co, and I'll have that posted up on the screen here for the winner. And next week's giveaway, thanks to Mary Brown for giving me another stack of books, is 5 books, or 4 here, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have Twined Knitting, Ready Set Knit Cables, and this is by Carrie Hammett, and she was my local yarn store owner for many years. Then she sold the shop to Cynthia, and then Cynthia sold the shop. But yeah, Carrie wrote that. She wrote 2 books. And one of the patterns in this book is the book cover that I knit for my book that I showed on the podcast. It's blue with cables on it. It has little ribbon ties. So that's in this. So that's kind of nice. Then the book Nordic Knitting, which is a beautiful hardcover. These would just be inspirational. And then the last one is called Traditional Knitting from the Scottish and Irish Isles. So those are the 4 books that are going in this week's giveaway. And you're going to answer the question at the bottom in the comments. Do you prefer wood or metal needles? So we're talking knitting needles here or crochet hooks. And the key word that you have to use in your comment is needle. So you have to put the word needle in there, because that's what I'll search for in the comments. So anybody who doesn't want to win a prize that is already a commenter, if you don't use the word needle, then that's fine. You can comment anything about all, the other things I talked about. But just use the word needle if you want to be in for the prize. So that is next week's giveaway. And we have a few teaching gigs in September. I will be teaching beginning knitting at the local library on Wednesdays. I'm teaching how to use Ravelry like a pro at Stephen B on the 14th, I think. 14th, is that right? Yeah. And then I'm teaching at the Minnesota Knitters Guild. So if you are local and you have not signed up for the guild yet, I think there are still spaces available in some of the classes. And that's being held in Plymouth at the hotel in Plymouth. I can't think of what hotel is it, Cori? Crown Plaza, maybe? It's right off of 494 and 55 in the Twin Cities. if you're familiar at all with the West Side. But there is a big vendor market, which is free for anybody to go to. You can just go in and shop for the day if you don't want to take classes. Otherwise, you can sign up for classes online for the yarn over, and then I'll be done teaching for the year. Because I will not teach now until January. I have some stuff set up for January with the Dallas Knitters Guild and Stephen B. Once my shoulder has recovered, I'm not going to teach over the holidays or that kind of thing. So I think that's everything. This was a super long one this week. It's going to take forever to edit. It takes me about 3 times as long to edit as it does to record it. But I had all this stuff to share with all of you guys. I thought I would do the sign off this week. I haven't done it in a while. Okay, everybody come in for your hug. Big hug, crooked hug. I love you all. Let's do the sign off this week. I haven't done it in a while. No green bananas. Grace costs you nothing. Waddle on. Keep it colorful. Keep your fork. Buy the gravy. Never complain with your mouth full. And you'll never regret ripping back. I just ripped back again on one of those designs. Okay, see you all in 2 weeks. Hopefully I will have all of my design work done and caught up. I'm not sure how I'm gonna get all that done with 5 of those days or on a vacation, but we're gonna have an amazing time in Maine. I'm gonna go to several yarn stores, so I'll have some stuff to show you.